The retired Marine walked into the sheriff's office with a dog that shouldn't exist and said 5 words no one expected. "I know where Carter is." Sheriff Dalton looked up from his desk. Every cop in Shepherd's Mill knew the name Daniel Carter. Warrant officer, killed in a training accident 19 years ago. Closed case. Finished. So when Marcus Cole stood there, rain dripping off his jacket, a Belgian Malinois sitting perfectly still at his side, Dalton didn't know what to say. "Carter's dead," Dalton finally said. "Has been for almost 20 years. Marcus didn't move. "No, sir, he's not." "Excuse me?" "He's 200 miles off the coast of Virginia, wrapped in a tarp, weighted with chains, and I can prove it." The room went silent. 3 deputies stopped typing. The dispatcher's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. Dalton stared at Marcus like he'd just claimed the moon was made of cheese. "How the hell would you know that?" Marcus looked down at Rex. The dog's ears were forward, eyes locked on Dalton, completely still, like he was waiting for permission to do what he'd been trained to do 19 years ago. "Because," Marcus said quietly, "this dog won't let me forget." Dalton looked at them waiting for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. Marcus Cole had served 14 years in the United States Marine Corps. He had enlisted at 19, the year after his father died, the year he understood that certain kinds of grief required structure or they would consume you entirely. He had been good at the work in the way that some people were good at things that cost them. Not effortlessly, not without damage, but genuinely. He had a quality that his first sergeant had described in a fitness report as situational accuracy, an ability to read what a situation actually was rather than what it appeared to be or what he wanted it to be. This quality had kept him alive in 3 combat deployments and 1 assignment he was not cleared to discuss. It had also made him, in the years after his discharge, a difficult person to be around for people who preferred their situations left unread. He had bought 40 acres outside Missoula in 2016 with the money from a disability settlement and 3 years of careful saving. He had built a structure that was somewhere between a cabin and a house. He had learned which silences were productive and which ones were simply the absence of noise. He had learned that the distance between those 2 things was larger than he had expected and required more work to navigate than anything he had done in uniform. Rex had arrived in his life the way the most significant things arrived. Not announced, not chosen exactly, more like recognized. In early 2017, a former colleague named Winslow had called on a Tuesday afternoon. Winslow had been in logistics, 4 years, knew everyone in the working dog community, the kind of man who accumulated information the way other people accumulated debt, compulsively and with the vague sense that it would eventually be useful. He said, "I have a dog situation, 7 years old, Belgian Malinois, military working dog, explosives detection, 11 years of service, 2 deployments, decorated handler. The handler died 6 months ago. Training accident at Quantico. The dog went to a contractor facility for retirement care, and the contractor lost their federal contract and the facility is closing in 72 hours, and no one has placed this dog, and he's going to be euthanized on Thursday if someone doesn't move." Marcus said, "What's the dog's name?" Winslow said, "Rex, service number K9-4417. Marcus said, "What was the handler's name?" There was a brief pause on the line. Winslow said, "Warrant Officer Daniel J. Carter, killed October 14th, 2003. Marcus drove to Denver. He had not known Carter well. They had been in adjacent units for a joint training exercise in 2001 and had spent 3 days in the same facility and had the kind of brief, precise connection that military people sometimes formed. The kind based entirely on recognizing something in another person's way of working rather than anything personal or social. He remembered Carter as a man who did things completely, who did not leave things partially done, who had a quality of attention that the dog at the contractor facility in Denver clearly shared. Because when Marcus walked into the kennel and looked at Rex, Rex looked back at him with the full focused attention of an animal that was not confused about what was happening. Not panicked, not defeated, waiting. Like a soldier at a post who had not received the order to stand down and was not going to leave the post without it. Marcus drove him home. For 4 years, Rex was fine. Quiet, precise, alert, the way well-trained working dogs carried themselves in retirement. Not domesticated, exactly. More like a soldier on extended leave who has not forgotten the work and is not pretending to. He ran the property perimeter every morning before Marcus was awake. He slept outside Marcus's bedroom door every night without being asked. He did not alert without reason. He did not bark without reason. He ate when food was available and drank when water was available, and moved through the days with a steadiness that Marcus found over time genuinely clarifying. The presence of an animal that was simply what it was, without the additional noise of being something else. Then in March of 2021, Marcus drove to Missoula for supplies, and as he passed the old federal storage depot on Route 9 at the edge of town, a decommissioned building behind chain-link fence, no trespassing signs, the kind of structure you drove past for years without actually seeing because it gave you nothing to see. Rex went rigid in the passenger seat. It was not gradual. It was immediate. The transition from relaxed to locked, the way a circuit closes. His nose went to the window glass. His ears came forward. His breathing shifted to the short, deliberate rhythm that Marcus had learned to read in Helmand Province as meaning, I have found it. Not, I think I found something. I have found it. Marcus said, What is it? Rex did not look at him. His eyes were fixed on the building through the glass. Marcus drove past. He went another quarter-mile down the road. He pulled over. He sat with the engine running and looked in the rearview mirror at a building he had driven past at least 100 times and had never once stopped to think about. He stayed there for 11 minutes. Rex stayed locked on the building in the rearview for 11 minutes without looking away. Then Marcus put the truck in drive and went home and started thinking about what he had just seen. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe and like this video. And before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. He came back the next day and the day after that. He did not approach the depot. He had enough history with federal facilities to know that walking up to a decommissioned military storage site with no authorization was the kind of decision that ended conversations he needed to keep open. He parked across the road and sat and watched. He brought Rex. Rex was different on these visits in a way Marcus spent 2 weeks trying to describe precisely to himself and eventually landed on this. Rex on his morning perimeter run was a retired dog doing what retired dogs did. Rex across the road from the depot on Route 9 was a working dog on station. The ears were forward the entire time. The nose moved continuously. He did not look at Marcus during these visits. He looked at the building with the unbroken attention of an animal that had been told to find something and had found it and was waiting for someone to come and see what it had found. Marcus started asking questions. He was careful about how he asked them and who he asked them to. 14 years in the Marine Corps had given him a good understanding of which questions were safe to ask loudly and which ones required a different approach. He contacted a former logistics officer named Prescott who had worked federal storage facilities in the Mountain West from 2001 to 2006. He had 2 conversations with a civilian contractor named Ewan who had been involved in decommissioning processes for federal properties in Montana and Idaho. He found a woman named Adkins who had done records management at Quantico from 2001 to 2005, and who, when Marcus described the depot and its location and the timeline of its decommissioning, went quiet on the phone in a way that was specific. Not uncertain, not confused, but the quiet of someone who had recognized something they had decided a long time ago not to recognize again. None of them gave him direct answers. The answers came from the shapes of the silences, from the things not said, from the pauses that appeared at specific moments in specific sentences. The picture that assembled itself over 3 months was this. The depot on Route 9 had been active as a federal storage facility through late 2003. It had been officially decommissioned in early 2004 through a process handled not by standard federal procedure, but by a specific private contractor whose company name appeared in one accessible document and nowhere else. The timing was exact. The depot went quiet 3 months after Daniel Carter's death. And Carter, according to his service record, had been assigned to a logistics evaluation at a Marine Corps facility in the Missoula region in September and October of 2003. He had been detailed to conduct an audit of ordnance decommissioning processes. He had been killed in a training accident 14 days after that assignment began. Marcus looked at the timeline for a long time. He looked at what it meant that Rex had gone rigid outside this specific building 17 years after Carter's death. He looked at what it meant that Rex had waited at that building every time Marcus brought him there, with the patience and focus of a dog that had been trained to find something and had found it and was waiting for someone to understand. He drove back to the depot on a Thursday night in November. He parked across the road in the dark and sat. Rex sat in the passenger seat, nose against the window, completely still. At 11:17, a delivery truck came through the east gate, not the main entrance, the east gate, which was supposed to be chained and locked. A truck entering a building that had been empty for 18 years. Marcus took photographs on his phone, the truck, the gate, the timestamp visible on a digital clock on the building across the street. He sat for another 2 hours. The truck left at 1:40. He photographed the exit. He drove home. He spent 3 days running every trace he could find on the depot's ownership history, the contractor who had handled the decommissioning, the shell company that appeared in the one document he had found, the shell company connected to a second company, the second company connected to a holding company, the holding company connected through a board member whose name appeared in a 2011 SEC filing to a defense contractor called Granite Shadow Holdings. Marcus had never heard that name before. He ran it through every resource he had. Granite Shadow Holdings had been incorporated in Delaware in 2001. It had received federal contracts totaling $62 million between 2002 and 2004. It had been dissolved in 2005. Its principals had never been publicly named. He sat with all of this for a week. Then he found a name. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Hess, United States Marine Corps, retired, Carter's commanding officer in 2003. The man who had signed Carter's assignment orders to the logistics evaluation. The man who, according to Carter's service record, had filed the incident report on Carter's training accident death within 4 hours of the event, faster than Marcus had ever seen an incident report filed for a fatality. Hess had retired from the Corps in 2005. He was living outside Helena, Montana. He was 71 years old. Marcus sent him a text message. He did not ask a question. He sent the photographs of the truck at the depot gate and one line of text. I have Carter's dog. Hess called him 40 minutes later. His voice was the voice of a man who had been waiting for a phone call for a long time and had not known until it arrived exactly how much he had been dreading it. Come to Helena, Hess said. Alone. Marcus drove to Helena. He did not go alone. He went with Rex. The property outside Helena was a working ranch, not large, not prosperous looking, the kind of place maintained with the specific economy of a man living on a pension and accustomed to doing things himself, a barn that needed paint, a fence line that was solid, a house that was clean and organized and contained, Marcus noticed when he was shown inside. Almost nothing personal. No photographs, no decorations. The walls of a man who had been removing himself from his own life for a long time. Hess was at the kitchen table when Marcus came in. He was a big man, gone spare. Tall, the width in his shoulders reduced by age to something structural rather than physical. He looked at Marcus without expression. Then he looked at Rex. Rex had stopped in the doorway. He stood completely still for 3 seconds. Then he walked to the middle of the kitchen and sat down and looked at Hess the way he looked at the depot, with the full, unwavering attention of confirmed recognition. Hess looked at the morning for a long time. His expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted. A small movement in the chest, the particular contraction of a man absorbing something he had known was coming. I watched that dog work every day for 6 weeks, Hess said. His voice was flat, not cold, emptied. I told Carter he was the best working dog I had ever seen. He paused. After Carter died, I was told the dog had been euthanized. Standard protocol. He paused again. I believed it because I needed to believe it. He looked up at Marcus. Sit down, he said. Marcus sat. Rex did not move. What do you know? Hess said. Marcus told him what he knew: the depot, the truck, the timeline, the shell company, Granite Shadow Holdings, the SEC filing. He laid it out in the order he had assembled it, without editorial, without accusation, the way you briefed a situation to someone who needed to understand it completely. Hess listened without interrupting. He held a glass of water on the table in front of him and did not drink from it. When Marcus finished, Hess was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 204 miles off the coast of Virginia, 37.4 degrees north, 74.2 degrees west. The kitchen was completely silent. Rex made a sound Marcus had never heard from him in 11 years. Not a growl, not a bark, a single low note held for 2 seconds and then released. Like a word in a language that did not use words. Like confirmation. Marcus kept his voice steady. Tell me what happened. It took Hess 2 hours to tell it, and he told it without stopping and without, Marcus thought, editing. Carter had arrived at the depot on September 29, 2003, for the logistics evaluation. He had been thorough from the first day. Hess said this was something that might have been pride in another context, the recognition of a quality he had valued in the man. Within 10 days, Carter had identified the primary discrepancy: 47 crates of ordnance listed in federal destruction records as having been processed and eliminated in August of 2003 were physically present in the depot. Not processed. Present. He had cross-referenced serial numbers against 3 separate record systems. The discrepancy was not an administrative error. The destruction records had been falsified. Carter had kept going. He was, Hess said again, thorough. He found the transfer manifests, documents showing that ordnance from the depot had been sold off-book to buyers whose names did not appear in any federal procurement system. He found financial records, partially obscured but traceable, showing payments moving through 2 shell companies into accounts connected to Granite Shadow Holdings. He found a document, a single internal memo, undated, unsigned, that connected Granite Shadow Holdings to a network that included 2 sitting congressional staffers, a retired general named Whitmore, and 3 mid-level procurement officers across 2 branches of the military. Carter had documented everything over 14 days of work. He had made copies of every document and secured them outside the depot. He had filed a formal report through proper military channels on October 9, 2003, addressed to the Inspector General of the Marine Corps with copies to 2 members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He was dead 5 days later. The training accident had been arranged by 2 men, a contractor security officer named Brielle and a logistics supervisor named Daines. Both men were now dead. Brielle had died of a heart attack in 2009. Daines had been killed in a car accident in 2014 that the relevant authorities had investigated and closed as accidental. Hess had been told about Carter's death 4 hours after it happened by a man whose name he would not say aloud, but whose rank and position he described with enough precision that Marcus could identify him without being told. He had been given a choice that was presented as a choice, but was not actually a choice. Remain silent and retain his career and pension and the safety of his family, or raise questions and find out what the people who had arranged a training accident for a warrant officer were capable of arranging for a lieutenant colonel with a wife and 2 daughters. Hess had been 28 years into his career. He had stayed silent. He had retired 2 years later and moved to Helena and spent 19 years living with what he had done, which was nothing, which was a specific kind of weight that did not reduce with time. I thought about it every year, Hess said. What I should have done, what Carter did. He found it and he filed it and he trusted that the system would work the way it was supposed to work. He was 29 years old. He still believed the system worked. He looked at his hands. He was right about what he found. He was wrong about what would happen when he reported it. Rex had not moved from the center of the kitchen during the 2 hours Hess spoke. He sat in the same position the entire time, not relaxed, not tense, but present in the way working dogs were present when something important was happening, and they understood that their job in this moment was to witness it. When Hess finished speaking, Rex looked at Marcus. It was the first time during the conversation that the boy had taken his eyes off Hess. He looked at Marcus for 3 seconds. Then he looked back at Hess. Marcus said, "I've been recording this conversation since we sat down. I'm going to use it." Hess nodded once. "I know," he said. "I could see the device." A pause. "Use all of it, everything I said, whatever it takes." He looked at Rex one more time. "He doesn't forget," Hess said. It was not a question. He had said it before in the first minute, and now he said it again with a different quality. Not observation, more like acknowledgement, more like speaking to something directly rather than about it. "No," Marcus said, "he doesn't." Hess looked at his hands again. "Carter would be glad," he said, "that someone found him." Marcus drove back to Missoula in the dark. Rex rode in the passenger seat. At the Montana state line, Marcus pulled over at a rest stop and sat with the engine idling and looked at his dog. Rex looked back. In 11 years, Marcus had learned Rex's expressions the way you learn the language of anyone you lived with long enough. What he read now was something he could only describe as resolution. Not completion, the work was not complete yet. But the piece of the work that Rex had been doing alone for 19 years, the piece that consisted of finding the door and sitting at it and waiting for someone to open it, that piece was done. Marcus put his hand on the dog's neck. Rex leaned into it. They sat at the rest stop for a while. Then Marcus drove to Shepherd's Mill. Sheriff Dalton listened to the recording 3 times without speaking. The first time his expression was the expression of a man hearing something he did not want to believe. The second time he had a legal pad in front of him and was writing. The third time he had set the pen down and was looking at the middle distance with his hands flat on the desk. The posture of someone doing the specific kind of thinking that required the rest of the body to be still. When the recording ended the third time, he sat back and looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he looked at Rex. Rex was sitting beside Marcus's chair. He had been sitting there for the 3 hours Dalton had been listening, with the patience of a boy that had been waiting 19 years and found 3 hours manageable. "You understand what this is," Dalton said. "I understand what it is. This cannot stay at the county level. This cannot stay at the state level. I know that. You're talking about federal, FBI minimum, possibly DOJ, possibly military court. I know that too." Dalton tapped his pen against the legal pad. Outside his window, Shepherd's Mill went about its Tuesday morning. A truck pulling into the gas station across the street, a woman walking a dog on the sidewalk, the particular unhurried rhythm of a small town that did not yet know what was about to change. "How long have you known?" Dalton said. 6 months building it," Marcus said. 19 years if you count the dog. Dalton looked at Rex again. "He was there," Marcus said. "Carter used him throughout the depot evaluation. Rex was present every day Carter worked in that facility. He was in the room when Carter found the first manifest. He was there for all of it." Dalton said, "And after Carter died, transfer paperwork, contractor facility. The documentation trail ends there until 2017. Dalton said, "And then you." "And then me." Marcus reached into the interior pocket of his jacket. He placed a leather journal on the desk. Olive green cover, military issue, the kind issued to warrant officers for field notes. Old. The leather had gone soft with age. The corners were worn down to the backing. Dalton looked at it. "Where did this come from?" Marcus said, "A package on my porch. No return address. Delivered 3 weeks ago. Someone had it for 19 years and decided it was time." He opened the journal to the last page. Carter's handwriting. Compact, precise, left-leaning. Dalton read the entry. It was dated October 12, 2003, 2 days before Carter died. "If something happens to me, it is not an accident. I filed the report. I gave them the documentation. I followed every correct channel. If I disappear, someone made a choice. Rex knows. He was present for the entire evaluation. He was with me when I found the first discrepancy and every discrepancy after. He sat beside me when I copied the serial numbers. He was in the room for all of it. Working dogs remember with their bodies. He will not forget this place. He will not forget what happened here. If I am gone, find Rex. He will go back to this place and he will wait. He was trained to find what is hidden, and he will not stop until someone understands what he is showing them. That person will have to know how to listen to a dog. J.C. Dalton read it twice. He set the journal down with the specific care of someone handling something that has been waiting a long time to be handled correctly. He did not speak for almost a minute. Then he said, he knew they were going to kill him. He knew it was possible, Marcus said. He was 29. He still thought if he documented everything and filed the report correctly, the system would catch it. But he was thorough enough to leave a backup. Dalton said, the backup was the dog. Marcus said, the backup was whoever found the dog and paid attention. Dalton made a phone call to a federal contact in Billings at 4:17 in the afternoon. 2 FBI agents and 1 DOJ investigators arrived at 7 that evening. They worked through the night. Rex sat outside the conference room door for 6 hours without being asked to. At 2 in the morning, one of the agents came out for coffee and found the dog in the hallway and stopped. She crouched down. Rex looked at her hand. Then he put his nose to her palm and held it there. She stood. He waited 19 years for this, she said. He didn't know he was waiting, Marcus said. He just didn't forget. The recovery operation in the Atlantic began 12 days later. It took 11 days. On the 8th day, they found the location. On the 11th day, they confirmed the identity. Marcus was on his porch in Montana when the call came. 6:14 in the morning. Rex was beside him. The agent said, we found him. Marcus closed his eyes. He sat with it for a moment. Then he said, does he have family? Parents deceased, no siblings, no spouse. A pause. You were listed as his emergency contact in his service record from a joint training exercise in 2001. Marcus had not known this. Carter had listed him, a man he had known for 3 days, as the person to call if something happened. The decision of a man who was thorough, who understood that the people closest to him were the people least able to help him if the wrong thing happened. Marcus had been far enough away to be useful. Carter had calculated that. Marcus sat on the porch for a long time after the call ended. Rex did not move. The Montana morning came up around them, cold, clear, the kind of light that arrived without announcement and made the tree lines sharp and exact. After a while, Marcus put his hand on Rex's back. Rex was warm under his palm, solid breathing, lighter by the specific measure of a thing that had been waiting to be known and was now known. Carter was reburied at Arlington National Cemetery on a Thursday in November, 19 years and 26 days after his death was staged, and his body was placed in the Atlantic with chains and weights. Marcus drove from Montana. Rex rode in the passenger seat and did not sleep for any of the 16 hours. This was not unusual for Rex on significant occasions. Marcus had stopped trying to understand the full range of what Rex understood and had accepted that the range was larger than he could map. The cemetery in November was cold and exact, the kind of cold that came without wind, that settled into clothing and stayed. The ceremony was not small. There were people who had known Carter, former unit members who had believed the accident report for 19 years and were here with the expressions of people who had discovered that what they had been grieving was different from what they thought. There were investigators and federal officials who had worked the case in the months since Marcus had walked into the sheriff's office. There were senators who understood they were present not only to honor Carter, but to acknowledge publicly and on record that the system he had trusted had failed him. And there were working dog handlers, active duty and retired, with their dogs or without, who had come because Rex was going to be here, and that meant something to people who understood what it meant to work beside an animal for years and have that animal carry something you could not. Marcus stood at the edge of the assembly, away from the main groups. He wore his dress blues. They fit the way things fit when you have not worn them in years, but your body has not entirely forgotten what it cost to earn them. Rex sat beside him, straight-spined, ears forward, watching the ceremony with the attention he brought to everything that mattered. The honor guard carried the casket with the precision that was the only language available for what could not be said in words. The chaplain spoke about sacrifice. A 3-star general spoke about integrity and what it meant to do the right thing when doing the right thing was dangerous. Marcus listened and felt what he always felt at military ceremonies. recognition of what was being honored, and resistance to the gap between the honoring and the years of silence that had preceded it. Carter had deserved all of this 19 years ago. The flag was folded, 13 folds, each one precise and deliberate. The general looked at the assembly for Carter's next of kin. There was none. He looked at Marcus. Marcus walked forward. He accepted the flag. The general said the words, "On behalf of the president, the commandant, a grateful nation." Marcus received them. He turned to walk back. Rex was already moving. He walked to the casket in a straight line at the pace he used for everything important. Not hurried, not slow, the pace of a dog that knows exactly where it is going and has no uncertainty about the path. He sat down beside the casket. He put his left front paw on the polished wood. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at the flag that covered the casket with the same focused and patient attention he had brought to 19 years of not forgetting. The assembly went quiet in the specific way crowds went quiet when something was happening that was not in the program. A sound moved through the people that was not quite speech and not quite silence. Someone near Marcus said very quietly, "That's Carter's dog." Rex stayed for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Marcus counted. Then he stood, walked back to Marcus, and sat at his left side. The honor guard raised their rifles. 3 volleys across Arlington. Then the bugler. Taps carried across the cold November grass and reached the tree line and came back. Changed the way sounds came back, changed from open spaces, softer, slower, as if the distance had taken something out of it and left only what was essential. When the last note was gone, Marcus crouched beside Rex. He put his hand on the dog's neck, on the place between the shoulder and the base of the skull, where Rex always held tension when he was working. The tension was gone. In 11 years of mornings and 11 months of building this case, and 19 years of whatever Rex had been doing since October 2003, through all of it, that tension had been there. The specific physical signature of unfinished work. Now it was gone. Marcus did not say anything out loud. He kept his hand on Rex's neck and felt the absence of the tension and understood what it meant. After a while he stood. Rex stood with him. They walked away from the grave together, and the November light came down flat and cold, and the work was done. 4 months later, Marcus received a letter from the Marine Corps. Inside was a 1-page document on official letterhead. The Carter-Rex Protocol, a new policy requiring that any military working dog whose handler died under circumstances subsequently determined to be suspicious be placed with a vetted service member and monitored for behavioral changes consistent with environmental memory of a crime scene. The protocol had been named by the DOJ agent who had found Rex in the hallway at 2 in the morning and received his nose against her palm. Marcus read it at the kitchen table. Rex came over and smelled it. His tail moved once, the single slow wag of a bum that has received information it considers accurate. Marcus set the document down. He put his hand on Rex's head. Rex was 12 years old now. He moved more slowly in the mornings. The gray on his muzzle had spread toward his eyes. He was still the first one up every day, and he still ran the property perimeter before Marcus was awake, and he still slept outside the bedroom door every night. He was entirely at peace with being exactly where he was. Carter had written, "He was trained to find what is hidden, and he will not stop until someone understands." He had been right about the tone and right about the kind of person who would need to find him, and right that someone would eventually pay the right kind of attention. Marcus thought about Carter sometimes. The 3 days in 2001, the specific quality of attention he remembered. The man who had been thorough enough to put Marcus's name in an emergency contact file, and thorough enough to leave a message in a journal, and thorough enough to train a dog that would not forget. He thought about what it cost to be that kind of thorough. He thought about a 29-year-old man who had found something true and done everything correctly and trusted that being correct and honest was sufficient protection, and who had understood, somewhere in those last 5 days, that it was not and had done the only thing left available. He had left a trail. Rex had been the trail. Rex had been the message and the evidence and the thing Carter could do when there was nothing left to do. Some things did not stay buried, not when the right dog was still working. Not when someone finally stopped and listened. Marcus set the letter on the table and looked at his dog, and his dog looked back at him with the clear, uncomplicated attention of an animal that had finished the work it came here to do and was glad to still be here. That was enough. That was all of it. That was exactly enough.